met last week as part of our community test. There were, and as part of our observation of Kayvon demoing one of the RSON contracts against the public network and then in a local network environment, is we as a group identified a number of questions related to consensus that we as a group did not have clarity on. And so we left that last session with a hope that we could include Kent here in today's session so that we could address those questions. And that is exactly the plan for today. We have collected a number of questions, many thanks to NutZipper and Dan and Kent for their conversation in the node testing channel. And so I'm curious, my proposal here is to use those questions. I think NutZipper, you've got 12 questions here as a framework for continuing the conversation about consensus as it specifically as it relates to dApp developers interacting with a live network. And so I'm going to share my screen. I've captured those questions in a wiki page. Yes. Capture those questions in a wiki page, and I think the thing to do, my proposal here is that we talk through these, and I'm open to feedback on that. So I'm going to pause and ask, is there any feedback or other ideas about how we should proceed addressing questions related to consensus? And hearing none, we'll go forward as suggested. So Kent, are you able to see my screen?
Yes, I am.
Fantastic. Can you speak to question 1 then, please? Oops, sorry, that's not nice. There you
go. So I guess in this case, since the validator if they send from the same rev vault, that would mean the transactions will be conflicting. And so the 2 different validators will produce conflicting blocks. And so only one will one will be orphaned, and the other one will potentially be finalized depending on, maybe there's actually another block that will cause both of them to be orphaned. And in terms of the balance, only the transactions that get processed will lower the balance.
NutZipper, does that make sense to you?
Yeah, and we had a conversation with Kent. So as I understand, the validator that has its deploy included in the orphaned block will later try to repropose this deploy, and will try to repropose until this deploy will be included in the block that will be accepted by the network, right? Or at some point, this deploy may be just dropped off.
So the deploy hasn't been included in a block yet?
No, the validator, one of the validators proposed the block that is orphaned, and the deploy that I made to that validator. What happened to this deploy, to this transaction?
Oh, I see what you mean. Yes, it will get redeployed in a future block.
So it will try to redeploy, include this deploy in the future blocks until that future block will be accepted by the network.
Yes.
Okay, thanks. And there is no any threshold when deploy is considered like outdated. So, for example, if I send a transaction and it didn't go through in several hours, maybe I don't want these transactions to go through anymore.
Yeah, currently we only remove deploys once the block that they're contained in is finalized. And so like the only time any deploy is removed is when you trigger a call to VDAG or any future API that will call last finalized block.
Sorry, I didn't get that. So if there are some deploys in the queue that weren't proposed yet, they can be removed when finalization is called.
Oh no, if they're not in a block yet, then they will not be ever removed as of now.
But if they were proposed and node failed to include this block into the network's DAG, so on finalization, these deploys can be dropped off.
Yes.
Okay. Is there any way to DApp developer to know if this happened? So he need to notify the user that his deploy won't ever be executed.
Your deploy will always be executed because it will remain in the queue as long as it's not included in a block that isn't finalized. I'm not sure if I said that right, but basically the guarantee is that if your deploy gets into the queue, it will eventually get into a block. As long as you don't shut off your node and restart it.
So I didn't get the finalization part. From what I heard is finalization somehow trigger some cleanup process.
Yes.
Of deploys that was included into previous proposals, but that proposed blocks were orphaned.
No. Finalization means when a block is finalized, then that block cannot be orphaned. And it doesn't clean up previous deploys. It cleans up deploys in that finalized block. So the reason you can clean those deploys up is because you know that they're in a block that won't be orphaned. And so it's safe to remove them, right? Like it's yeah.
Okay, I got I got this. Thanks. So now just know that it won't be situation when the node should to redeploy this stuff again because the block is finalized. Okay.
Exactly.
Thanks.
Somewhat related to this question, listening to this conversation, Kent, is it possible in a deployment to specify a time frame, meaning that if so I'm deploying something, and if it doesn't get picked up in a block by a certain time, to cancel my request to deploy it?
Nice feature.
So there is a, well, I don't know if it's recent, but there is a feature called the oh wow, the field is called valid after block number, but basically it makes it such that after the threshold number of blocks, then the deploy becomes expired, and that threshold is set to 50 right now. So technically the deploy isn't removed from the queue, but it is just filtered out when a validator proposes. So it will seem like it's removed from the queue, or that's it would have the same effect.
And that's an option, not the default.
That is a default.
Okay, so the default is if your deploy doesn't get into a block within, right now, 50 blocks, it will never be included in a block.
Yes.
Thanks, that's helpful. Anything else related to question 1 here on my screen? Okay, let's move on to question number 2.
So I guess the Casper submodule is triggered or is called during deploy propose, and any of the commands, show blocks, vdag, there's yeah, so but if you treat the Casper submodule as if that's what Casper means, then I guess that's the answer. I guess a different view is that if you treat Casper as just the estimator, then it is triggered every time you do propose, because it needs to figure out what the parent is and on when the block is received, because it needs to verify the parent. Yeah, does that answer the question?
Yeah, so basically Casper is triggered on every propose. Short answer.
Yes. And I think maybe it's helpful to not think of Casper as, or like, well, like think of, or like break Casper down, right? Think of Casper as like two different components, the estimator and the safety oracle. I think that will clear up a lot of confusion. So the estimator is what picks the parent given a set of justifications, or basically just a way to resolve forks, right? Like it picks it orders the forks in terms of priority. And so whenever you need to, it allows you to progress, essentially. And it's really the only thing that's required. Like, you don't need the safety oracle. It's a very handy feature for the user, because technically a user is only supposed to rely on values that are in finalized blocks, and you don't know if a block is finalized until you run the safety oracle. But at the same time, you can always guess whether a block is finalized. I mean, I say that by, I mean, like, if a block is in some vague sense, like deep enough in the chain and has been built on top of by many validators, or many rounds by all the validators, then you're almost guaranteed that, or just by, I guess, manually looking at it, you can figure out that it's finalized. I mean, I don't recommend that. Mm-hmm.
How does the end user interact with safety oracle?
Oh, when they call VDAG, or any call that calls last finalized block. So safety oracle returns a fault tolerance. And if that fault tolerance level is greater than the threshold, then that block is finalized.
Yeah, I got. So actually, it's not end user handy thing for end user, but it's handy thing for the platform to. It's how the platform detects if the block is finalized. Because end user that doesn't know anything about safety oracle. He just asking what's the last finalized block, and this work safety oracle does.
Yes, that's the work that safety oracle does. I'm not sure if I would say it's handy for the platform, because the platform doesn't care. Well, besides the fact that some of the garbage, or I shouldn't say, well, some of the like deploys that could be removed will get removed, but that's a very minor cleanup, in my opinion. So like the platform can, like, if we didn't have the safety oracle implemented, the platform will still work, and the only difference is that, well, the deploys will accumulate a bit more quickly, and the user won't be able to figure out which block is the last finalized one, besides some educated guesses.
Okay, this makes sense. Thank you. All clear.
Anything else related to question 2?
Not for me.
Cool, thank you. All right, let's look at question number 3.
So I guess it depends on how the scheduler gets, or how the scheduler gets scheduled, or the schedules between whether to process a new deploy or something that came from the network. And I guess in the current implementation, I mean, this might be a better question for the Node team, but if my understanding is correct, it just prioritizes what got in first. And so
That's my understanding as well. And Node team is getting ready to provide a fairness property. That may change how this happens.
Got it.
My question was mostly, I can imagine that incoming blocks can have some data that will be conflicting with the new block proposed. So even if this kind of old blocks, old deploy waiting for propose, the new deploy made just now can go out faster than these new deploys that came in the blocks from the network.
So conflicts only happen if there are 2 blocks in parallel, so to speak. But if one builds on the other, then it's not a conflict. It's just something building on top of another, if that makes sense.
No, Zipper, can you give an example of what you imagine a conflict would be?
For example, imagine this situation that were mentioned in the first point, in the first item. So I submitted two deploys into 2 different validators. One validator proposed a block, sent to the second validator, and at the same time, second validator get some deploys and try to propose again. The first block is sitting on the queue of the second validator with the deploy that can empty my vault. And at the same time, he gets the deploy, the direct deploy, the second validator, that tries to send some money from my vault to another address. So the question, which deploy will be executed first?
So I guess the short answer is you don't know which deploy gets executed first. It's whatever that reaches either. So if they get proposed at the same time, then most likely the one that was inside a block that was proposed by a higher state validator will get picked. if one of them manages to reach, or one of them gets packaged in a block and then sent over and then received, and then another validator has proposed on top of that, then maybe both of them will succeed, except it won't be a success in the sense that the second deploy will try to pay from an empty vault, so that won't work.
Actually, I wonder, is the situation when people deploy to all validators in the shard is an organic situation, and is it like considered like organic use case, or it is better to have one validator that is proposing blocks and the others just keep it in sync?
It is certainly more efficient if only one validator is proposing, and then the only drawback is that if only one validator is proposing, then no blocks will get finalized unless that validator has a majority of the stake.
I guess. Understood. Thank you.
Hey guys, I've got a question about the scenario that's described at the beginning.
Go for it.
Okay, so it says, imagine a user wants to send some rev to two friends simultaneously and deploys the two sends to two different validators, and they propose simultaneously. So I'm not clear whether it's the case that this is like a double spend attack where they only have enough funds to pay one of the friends, or if it's a totally legitimate thing, like I have plenty of money to pay both of them and I just happen to be deploying it to two different validators.
Yeah, so it's kind of, in my view, it is a natural thing. So it can happen. So I deployed transactions to different validators.
Yeah, I totally agree it can happen. And I think it's a super interesting scenario. But did you understand the question I was asking? Does the person who's deploying actually have enough money to pay both friends?
Yes.
They do have enough.
In my question, yes.
Okay, cool. Okay,
And,
nice.
and Joshua, your observation is also accurate.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so here's my question. Isn't part of like the beauty of using a DAG instead of a chain the fact that we don't have to know or care which one of those happened first? Isn't that why we get like some concurrency?
Yes, that's assuming that we figure out a way to do block merging.
Yeah, okay. Oh, right. Gotcha.
So the only reason why we say that, conflicting blocks, like one of them is just basically thrown away, is because we don't have that block merging, and it's
Gotcha. Okay. Cool. Understood. Thanks.
So in future we might have some procedure to this situation be resolved in more elegant way by block merging.
Yes. So the at least outlined path is that for any conflicting transactions, you would first apply the one that has that's from the one with the higher stake block, and then you would apply the next one, and so on. And that's for the conflicting transactions. And for all the non-conflicting transactions, they would just run in parallel.
Mm-hmm.
can we move on to question 4? Actually, let me pause here. We have about 30 minutes left. I'm going in order because that's how the questions were presented. But given the time, I know for sure we will not get through all of them. Nutzipper, as the person who submitted these questions, do you want to reprioritize, or should we move on to number 4?
Yeah, I guess that why not sure. The 5th one, it's not, doesn't matter. The 4th one, I guess, also not so important. I guess we can start with the 7th. The answer on that may be quite short, and then move to the 8 and go for the.
Okay, cool. Let's look at number 7 then.
So if the block has already been processed, then it's just dropped. If the block is not, if it's still in the middle of being processed, then, well, actually, let me back up. Sorry. First of all blocks get added to the node queue, and the node queue then pulls messages off that queue and passes them to Casper, currently 1 by 1. And at that point, when Casper receives that block, if it's already been received, then it's dropped. And since we only process blocks one at a time, there's not a situation when it's still processing the previous block. So we can eliminate that. And yeah, that should cover all the cases.
Yeah, I've asked this question because from the testnet user perspective, I saw that there is a lot of block being received again and again, and for quite a long time. So maybe I'm missing something, but I will pay attention to this. So I was wondering why can nodes receive block again and again for about an hour, the same block.
Yes, that happens because whenever a block is missing any dependencies, it requests those dependencies from other blocks. And when it requests dependencies from other blocks, it requests it to all nodes. So even though it only needs the dependency from one block, from one node, it'll get it back from all nodes potentially. So you might get it back n times more than necessary. And so by default, you'll be seeing a lot of "I've received the block again" kind of message.
I think there is a plan in the node space to make that a little at least to make it quieter. I'm not sure what they're choosing to do. They're either choosing to make it quieter or to acknowledge that it's already been received before, and therefore we don't need, thanks but no thanks.
I'm sure. I feel that I want to go forward with this question, but I'm not sure about my observations on the testnet, because I still have a question why, for example, if my node received block B right now, and then it received the same block B in an hour.
Do you observe, let's dig into that observation. You receive block B, you do not observe processing and adding block B to your DAG. And then you note that you receive block B again later. Is that correct?
I'm not sure if it was not processed, but I wonder why the block shouldn't be changed, right? So the data still the same. Why Node just doesn't save this data and do not ask for the block anymore?
So blocks are immutable. So yes, the data will never change if you have a block with the same hash. We do not do any kind of checks to say, do I already have this block as of now? So, I mean, there are many ways in which, like if you have a block followed by 20 different blocks, and then another block, or sorry, let's say block B, and then 20 different blocks, and then block B again. Then by the time you get through the sandwich 20 blocks in the middle, it could be an hour. Maybe that's why.
Well, the other scenario where you would get receive a block that you already have, let's imagine you have a state of the DAG, you've received block B, not only have you received it, but you've computed it and added it to your DAG. And now new node joins the network and starts building its DAG. You send it block B, and as part of new node's process, it computes block B and then resends it to the network. You're going to receive it again, even though you've already added it, right? But and take no action based on that receipt.
Yeah. Understood. Okay, I guess we can go further.
Okay.
20 minutes left.
Okay, let's look at question number 8. Or did we just answer that? 9, thank you.
9 was already answered. So the 10th one was also.
Agreed.
We were talking about that. About block merging, we've talked already also. So the main question is the 12th, which is bothering me.
All right, let's take a minute and read it.
So on the node testing channel, I guess I haven't given your reply yet. But you also haven't answered my question whether what you're describing is using Ed's wallet or not.
Sorry, I've answered in the node testing channels. I've asked Ed to try his wallet before I deployed conflicting transactions and after. So when I deployed 10 conflicting transactions to 10 validators, actually I deployed more, but I guess it's not a big significant difference. These make testnet quite unresponsive, which observed Ed when he tried to get the balance after I deployed.
It doesn't have to be Ed's wallet. It's just
Yeah,
that.
yes.
I see.
Just
Anything else happening?
Well, I would just say that. I mean, it's hard to say like what the reason is, but like if so like you're saying all your deploys got processed, but the network is unresponsive afterwards.
I guess that now when network converged to final values, it is responsive again. I deployed check balance right now or a couple hours ago, and it went through smoothly, and I got in the logs of the validator I deployed to the answer very fast. So I think that Ed's wallet will be working smooth also. But the converging phase from after I deployed conflicting stuff to the situation when network is responsive again is quite long. From my observation, it can last like several days.
I see. Yeah, I mean that's just a problem that the node is slow, or at least we've been seeing proposal times go up to minutes for whatever reason, and we just need to debug or do some profiling, figure out what's happening.
And actually, the one-off symptoms is that logs doesn't show anything, like nothing happened. So I would expect to see a lot of stuff happening, a lot of computation, but obviously there are some computations, but we don't see them.
Got it. Yeah, we'll have to look into that.
Yeah, thank you.
Zipper, you don't see that in it. Clarify, please. You don't see that in the log of your node?
I'm listening to the logs of one of the validator, which I picked. Usually I'm listening on the Node 7.
Okay.
And when I deployed a lot of stuff, I see the execution of that stuff is very slow. So
Yeah.
I deployed, for example, 30 deploys, sent 30 deploys, and I see prints of that deploys, traces of execution only in 5 minutes. So 30 lines came up only 5 minutes. When usually if I deploy just one transaction, I see the execution in about 2 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
And when there is conflicting stuff, so all the questions came up from this observation. So I try to understand what can be the cause of this problem.
Okay.
It's
Have you also been looking at the at just the Node 7? Do you have access to the Node 7 machine view? Have you also looked just at CPU usage of Node 7 during this time? I don't remember if you have access to that or not.
I don't have. I have access to the charts.
Yeah.
So when I deploy conflicting stuff,
Mhm.
the CPU rises. So
Okay, so
it
clearly something's
tells
happening.
this.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
something's happening, and also traffic, node traffic is rising steadily and steadily. So uniformly. How can I say? It's pretty straight line on the graph.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. We have about 10 minutes left during this session. Are there any other questions related either to specifically to consensus or to other issues related to the use of testnet?
I can say that after this session, it's much more clear for me what's happening and all the things about consensus and nodes and the overall situation.
Good.
Many things.
Nutzipper, it sounds like you've been doing a lot of like playing with the testnet. I'm just curious, what kind of stuff are you like deploying, like code wise? Mostly like Rev stuff or rolling contracts, or what do you
Yeah,
work?
actually, my goal is to be sure that if I deploy Rev transfers, in the end, network will be in the state where each deploy is processed. So I try to build a thing that deploying stuff and then calculating the ending, the final balances. And if the final balances match with what was deployed. So
Yeah,
this is
cool.
what I'm deploying.
That makes sense. Have you tested any? Are you testing mostly things where like they should work or something specific should work, or have you tested any where you're doing like spend more funds than you have, or any of those kinds of cases?
Yes, in the process of trying this, I have situation when I was trying to spend when I have no money. So actually, this works out good. There were messages in logs that you have no funds, or if I try to use wrong key, network said me that you're using the wrong key, you cannot spend this money. So yeah.
Awesome, that's cool.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments, feedback? Okay. Well, if there's nothing else, let's stop here. Thank you, Kent. Thank you very much for coming to address these questions. NetZipper, also very grateful for your work to put these questions into Discord and for supporting the conversation here today. Really, really helpful stuff. We plan, so we are closing out our current sprint and plan to release Node 7 sometime next week. I will want to be very clear that if you are currently using testnet and you've got contracts running on testnet, what's going to happen, there's a breaking change in Node 7 related to the algorithm used for the key set. We are moving from ED2 5519 to SecP256K1. You will find that you'll need to update your key pair. You can do that via keygen in Node, or you can bring your own, but just know that that change is coming for you. It's certainly a big and breaking change. There are also some other smaller changes that will be in Node, but from my perspective, I understand them to be nice to haves and not things that you would absolutely need to make changes in order to continue using the testnet successfully. So look for that next week. Hopefully we will have Node 7 running in the public testnet by this time next week, and we have a test case scenario that came up in our dev work yesterday that we might work together as a community to reproduce using that public testnet. Thanks again for your time this week. Look forward to talking with you again next week. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.